Welcome back, everyone. Here on the channel, I use AI to break down complex things like politics without bias and without emotion. Now, you probably know that Donald Trump had his inauguration a few days ago. He gave an entire speech about making America greater and stronger, surrounded by a whole bunch of billionaires and Melania rocking a pretty impressive hat. And of course, there was Elon Musk. But that's not all. Donald Trump also signed around 200 executive orders already, and today I'm going to ask ChatGPT to help us figure out if these orders are good or bad for the United States and how they might actually affect our day-to-day lives. As always, a real quick reminder before we get started that if you like this kind of content, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and most importantly, subscribe to the channel right now so that you don't miss any of the videos that I publish. I've got brand new ones every single week and actually even more often than that sometimes. Alright, enough of all that, let's jump right into it. I just opened the White House website to the page on presidential actions, and I'm going to pick out some of the orders that Trump has already signed. We'll begin with that whole Gulf of America thing and ask ChatGPT to break it down. Alright, here we go. You know, I always like to keep things transparent so that you can see every move that I make, and now I'm letting it know that Trump has signed a whole bunch of orders and it needs to break them down using the latest information. As always, I'm asking it to be clear and straightforward and unbiased. No left or right-leaning takes, no overly polite fluff, just straight to the point. So, it's ready to go, and let's see what ChatGPT has to say about renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. And here's the answer. Trump signed an order to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, claiming this change would reflect and bolster American strength and national pride. On the surface, it might seem like a bold patriotic move, but when you dig deeper, it feels like a waste of time and energy. The Gulf of Mexico isn't just a name, it's a geographic and historical reality shared by multiple nations. The name reflects centuries of shared culture, history, and even trade between the United States, Mexico, and other countries in the region. Trying to erase that with a new name feels more like a shallow branding exercise than anything with real substance. Let's be honest, renaming a body of water does nothing to address real issues like border security, economic challenges, or even environmental concerns in the Gulf itself. It's not going to stop hurricanes, clean up pollution, or make the oil industry more sustainable. It's hard to see this as anything other than an attempt to grab headlines and appeal to a narrow sense of nationalism. At best, it's an empty gesture. At worst, it's divisive, ignoring the shared connections we have with neighboring countries for the sake of a symbolic name change. If this is meant to leave a legacy, it's hard to argue it's one worth remembering. Wow, that's a tough one. Alright, well, yeah, it's definitely grabbed some headlines. I mean, after all, even we're covering it today. But now let's stick with this structure and move on to the next one. Granting pardons for the January 6th rioters, which, by the way, ChatGPT predicted in the previous video. Alright, let's see what it has to say. Trump signed an order granting pardons to individuals convicted for their involvement in the January 6 Capitol riot, framing it as an act of justice for people he described as unfairly targeted by the legal system. On the surface, this might look like a gesture of loyalty to his base, but in reality it sends a dangerous message. Pardoning those who participated in an attack on the very heart of democracy undermines the rule of law and the principle that actions have consequences. The January 6 riot wasn't just a protest that got out of hand, it was an assault on democratic institutions, one that resulted in deaths, injuries, and a global loss of confidence in American governance. By excusing the behavior of those involved, Trump isn't just forgiving crimes, he's validating them. It's a signal that political violence is acceptable as long as it's in service of the right cause. This kind of decision does nothing to heal divisions or restore faith in the system, it only deepens the rift and sets a precedent that accountability can be brushed aside for political convenience. If justice is meant to be blind, this move just poked its eyes out. Alright, seems that ChatGPT is getting a little bit aggressive today. By the way, do you know anyone who would justify this move? I mean, what's the reasoning here? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below if I'm wrong, but it really seems like he pardoned them just because he could. Now let's move on to the next one about withdrawing the United States from the World Health Organization, and here we go. Trump signed an order to withdraw the United States from the World Health Organization, arguing that the organization failed to hold China accountable for its role in the spread of COVID-19 and that it wasn't serving U.S. interests effectively. While frustrations with the WHO's shortcomings might be valid, this decision feels more like a political stunt than a calculated move to address global health issues. Leaving the WHO doesn't fix its problems, it just removes the US from the table where those problems might actually be addressed. At a time when international cooperation on public health is critical, especially in a post-pandemic world, this move isolates the US and weakens its influence. Sure, the WHO isn't perfect, but stepping out entirely seems short-sighted, especially when reform from within could have been a better strategy. This decision doesn't just affect global health diplomacy, it sends a message that the US is willing to abandon leadership in international crises when things get tough. Ultimately, it feels more symbolic than substantive, leaving a vacuum for others to fill. Well, alright. Without further ado, here's the next order, pulling the US out of the Paris Agreement. And here it is. Trump officially pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Agreement, claiming it was unfair to American workers and placed disproportionate burdens on the U.S. compared to countries like China and India. While he framed it as protecting the economy, it was a reckless move that prioritized short-term gains over long-term survival. Climate change doesn't respect borders, and backing out of a global effort to address it is like refusing to chip in for the fire department while your house is on fire. The Paris Agreement wasn't perfect, but it was a starting point, a way for nations to hold each other accountable and push toward a collective solution. By leaving the US not only abdicated its leadership role, but also gave other nations an excuse to slack off. This wasn't about protecting jobs, it was about pandering to industries that didn't want to adapt. The truth is, pulling out didn't protect anyone. It just left the US looking selfish and short-sighted on a crisis that demands cooperation. It's hard to see this as anything but a step backward when the future is at stake. So we joined it in 2015, we left in 2020, we rejoined the following year, and now we're leaving it again. Got it. They probably should just hold a seat for us until 2028, don't you think? Alright, let's stick with the climate change theme and break down the next executive order about declaring a national energy emergency, and here it is. Trump declared a national energy emergency to boost domestic oil and gas production, lifting restrictions on drilling in areas like Alaska and rolling back environmental regulations. He framed it as a necessary step to secure energy independence and protect American jobs. While energy security is a valid concern, this move prioritizes short-term gains over long-term sustainability and environmental health. Expanding fossil fuel production at a time when the world is grappling with climate change feels short-sighted. The focus should be on transitioning to cleaner energy, not doubling down on practices that contribute to the problem. Calling this an emergency seems like a way to sidestep debate and push through policies that favor big energy companies while ignoring environmental and global consequences. It's a win for the oil industry, no doubt, but a loss for anyone who cares about a livable planet. Leadership should address energy needs without mortgaging the future, and this declaration falls far short of that. Good in the short term, but bad in the long run. Alright, so what's next? Oh, right, there was something about ending DEI programs, or as it's written on the website, ending radical and wasteful government DEI programs and preferencing. Whatever that means. Well, let's ask the AI about that. Trump signed an order to end diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI programs across federal agencies, arguing that these initiatives promote division and unfair treatment rather than merit-based equality. He framed it as a push for a colorblind society, where people are judged solely on their abilities. While this might sound appealing on the surface, the reality is far more complicated, and frankly, this move seems more like a step backward than real progress. DEI programs exist because systemic inequalities don't magically disappear without deliberate effort. Ending these initiatives doesn't eliminate bias, it just ignores it. By dismissing these programs, the government loses tools that help ensure opportunities are accessible to everyone, especially those who've been historically excluded. Calling this a push for fairness feels disingenuous. It's more about shutting down conversations about inequality than addressing the problem. If anything, this order seems designed to appeal to a specific political base rather than genuinely tackling the challenges of building a more inclusive workforce. It's hard to see how this fosters unity when it dismisses the experiences of so many Americans. Okay, well, let me know in the comments what you think about this move. Do you think that this is actually a problem that needs to be fixed? Either way, we'll see how this all works out. Now, we've got a couple more orders from Trump to go over, and I'll get into them in just a moment. But before I do, take a second to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because your support means a lot and it helps me to keep publish brand new videos every single week. Now back to the chat, where we will talk about the executive order that designates cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. It actually sounds good on the surface, but then again, who knows? Let's see what ChatGPT has to say about it. Trump signed an order designating international drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, claiming it would provide stronger tools to combat their activities and protect American communities. On the surface, it sounds tough on crime, but this approach is more about optics than effectiveness. Cartels are undeniably dangerous, and while labeling them as terrorists might help disrupt their operations, it doesn't address the core issues driving their existence, like drug demand in the US or economic instability in their home countries. It's not necessarily a bad move, but it risks oversimplifying a complex problem. This designation could complicate foreign relations, particularly with Mexico, whose cooperation is critical in addressing cartel violence and drug trafficking. It also raises legal and logistical questions. Could it lead to military intervention in other countries or impact U.S. citizens entangled in cartel networks? Fighting cartels requires strategy and partnership, not just flashy labels. While this move might play well politically, it's only a small piece of what's needed to tackle the root causes of the issue. So basically, ChatGPT thinks it's a good move. Got it. Alright, let's move on and ask about what they're calling restoring freedom of speech and ending federal censorship. I just hope that they're not planning to turn every social media platform into something like X, but let's see what it's all about. And here it is. Trump signed an order aimed at restoring freedom of speech by ending what he described as federal censorship, targeting social media platforms and alleged government overreach and regulating online content. He framed it as protecting Americans' First Amendment rights, but let's not sugarcoat it, this was more about his ongoing feud with big tech than a genuine effort to uphold free speech. The First Amendment already prevents the government from restricting speech. It doesn't guarantee anyone a free pass on private platforms. Social media companies are businesses. They set their own rules, and Trump himself used them extensively when it suited him. This move feels more like an attempt to reframe personal grievances as national policy. Sure, there are legitimate concerns about how platforms moderate content, but calling it federal censorship is a stretch. If anything, this order was about politics and control, not freedom. It's ironic to claim you're fighting censorship while demanding private companies bend to your will. Well, that was a tough one. Jeez. Alright, got it. Now, let's wrap things up with DOGE. Yeah, it's officially established, and on the website it's written as establishing and implementing the President's Department of Government Efficiency. So let's see what it thinks about it, and here's the final answer. Trump established the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, to streamline federal operations and reduce bureaucracy, branding it as a key initiative under his DOGE agenda. While efficiency in government is a noble goal, the creation of an entirely new department to achieve this raises eyebrows. It's ironic to tackle bureaucracy by adding more bureaucracy, and the flashy name feels more like a PR stunt than a serious governance plan, especially when it's obvious the whole department was designed to entertain and spotlight Elon Musk rather than focus on real solutions. If the goal is cutting waste and improving efficiency, there are already mechanisms within existing agencies to do so. Creating a whole new department seems unnecessary, particularly when the federal budget is already under pressure. The move feels more symbolic than practical, and without clear metrics or accountability, it risks being another layer of government that delivers little real change. If anything, this seems designed to grab headlines and appeal to certain voters rather than produce meaningful reform. It's hard to take an agenda seriously when it's wrapped in gimmicks. And that's it. Great job from ChatGPT, but let me know in the comments if this helped you understand what's going on and whether you agree with AI's takes or not. And after that, click right here to check out ChatGPT's predictions for Donald Trump's first 100 days in office. In short, mass deportations, tariffs, environmental policies, Greenland, and all of that. Thanks for watching. Go ahead and click on this video because I'm already there, and I just can't begin without you.